I think by a lot of journalists, it's been pretty poor, to say the least. I expected more.
I expected more. But on the issue of to what this whole issue about moderate Muslims, extremism, I think stems from the fact that the West is predominantly Christian, and their level of liberalization, as we like to put it, has actually watered down what the Christianity faith has always been about. And now they're trying to impose that level of modernization, liberalization on the Muslim faith.
But why be played out in the press? Why be played out on the front pages?
Because it's a battle of hearts and minds. Because the difference between moderate and extremism in Muslim terms is between those who are prepared to accept the faith for what it always has been, and those who are prepared to accept a more modernized version of it. And that is where the problem happens, is coming to terms with those who would want to form a better alliance with the West in terms of the flavor that they would like to appreciate, and those who would not be rigid who are rigid within their discussions and not willing to change at all.
Well, we had Inayat Bungawala from the Muslim Council of Britain expressing fears that the word Islam has now become a byword for bad, and nobody seems to be jumping on this, taking him to task about this. Is he right, or is he waging an unhelpful debate?
No, I think British Muslims should actually speak out more. I think, you know, his organization, the Muslim Council of Britain, have actually been very timid. You know, they don't know what to say, and indeed, they've been trapped by the tabloid agendas in a way that when they speak out, they are, to use a peculiar phrase, they have been crucified by them. Now, I mean, you know, what you've got going on now is the politics of fear, because after all, if the West is going to go and invade another country and steal its resources, it can't just do that to its public by admitting that it's going to do. So it's got to construct this edifice of why it's doing it. And it's got to say, you, the British public, are under threat. Now, I don't know if, you know, when I go out at night in London, I mean, you know, I see people drinking all night. I mean, drugs are freely available, you know, and I go home at night, sexual TV is there. I mean, if Muslim radicals are trying to change my way of life, they're doing a very bad job about it. Let's be honest. You know, the Western culture is trying to dominate, and that is what it's about. Cultural imperialism driven by economy, and the Islamic civilization, whether it's the Shia belt from Iran to the, you know, the Middle East, basically is challenging it now. China isn't, India isn't, South America isn't, and Africa isn't either.
Absolutely.
But Islamic civilization is offering a different set of values, and that doesn't suit Western economic and political needs.
It's been said, Ayo, by some media watchers that Islam is the new black, meaning in a very shorthand parlance that we now have a new whipping boy when it comes to the press, when it comes to the way in which stories are reported. Certain euphemistic terms are now heavily a part of the lexicon. You mentioned a bearded mullah, and clearly the image of a radical madman is what they want you to conjure up. Truth in this, or are we thinking all ethnicities are under threat in this country?
No, the Muslims are happening really bad, and they're being demonized, and it's reflective of it stemmed back again from the Iraq war, back again from the war with Afghanistan, and every Muslim in Britain, in Europe, feels invaded, feels under threat, and they've been pushed to the far side of society. And again, it's like everything else. If you push an individual very far, they're likely to react. And sometimes what you find is people reacting because they themselves would like to have a voice, and the media does pick up on that very quickly.
Two insights, if I may, very important as a think tank. Firstly, Muslims are not the new blacks, because there have been waves of Islamophobia in European history from the Crusades, when we were the Saracens. Then you had the rise of the Moors in Spain, yeah, the Reconquista, then the rise of empire, and so on. So I would say that the notion or the concept of Islamophobia defines Europe to be European, yeah? What does it mean to be European? Historically, you know, the legacy of conflict and coexistence with Muslims, European Muslims, has shaped Europe. Point one, that's good and bad, yeah? There's a legacy, there's a history. Point two, from my research on what's really going on, according to the think tanks which advise foreign policy, they talk about these strands, yeah? You know, moderates, radicals, and others, conservatives and so on. You know, they really slice the Muslim political spectrum. What they're really saying is, really, according to some researchers, is we don't really want to fight 1.5 billion Muslims. You know,
we want to cut it up.
That'd be quite messy. What they really want is a battle within Islam. No wonder the media hypes up, you know, who's a radical, who's a moderate, and who's a so-and-so.
Well, we mentioned the immigration issue there again, and this is something that continues to bear the brunt of a lot of the mid-Lloyds. We're talking about quotes along the lines of 4 out of 5 new jobs going to migrants. Is this ever going to stop? Are we talking about singing a whole new tune? I mean, it's been going on for as long as I've been in this country.
Well, yeah, many of these immigrants have now got white skin, by the way, so you can't even talk at it. You know, they come from Eastern Europe, many of those coming to Britain, so you can't even look at it as a race issue. It's again fear, and it's the politics of fear. And in my view, you've got 2 types of journalism. You've got a journalism that informs people, that reveals about what is going on in the world around them. You've got the other sort, which is increasingly dominating the British press, which is there, and they call it tabloid, which is there to confirm stereotypes, to reinforce prejudices and conjure fear.
But they wouldn't do this unless it's sold.
Well, I mean...
It's an economic issue at the very heart of this business.
Well, but who, you know, look at the owners of the papers. Yeah. I mean, at what level is it economic? I think that you've got the concentration now of the media in very small number of hands. And yeah, I think probably, you know, people who don't know, don't want to be educated, and it's easy to conjure up that fear. I think we should have a more responsible media, a public service media that informs people, and in that sense, I don't think it should be left to commercial pressures.
I think it's also about us as people. Do we want to read stories like that? Are we looking for stories that are predominantly about Muslims in a bad light? So, because there has to be an intent. Because if the stories themselves are on the paper and we don't buy the papers, then they don't sell. No one reads about them. But there's a desire to seek such information. So we ourselves are putting pressure on the media to go and acquire such stories. So I think we are as much to blame as the media themselves. I mean the public.
We wanted to, you know, make sure race had an adequate place in this conversation as well, because it still remains an issue. After all, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Ian Blair, said that the media was institutionally racist. If we look at the juxtaposition of a story like the murder of youngster Reece Jones and compare that with the treatment that the killing of another young man, Jesse James, just months earlier got, for something like this, Moeen, are we talking about skin color still determining coverage? Would Madeleine McCann, for example, still be on the front pages of the British press had she been, I don't know, a Nigerian girl who had gone on holiday with her parents?
There's no doubt about it that in a society like this with racist, you know, attitudes and Islamophobic, as we've just mentioned, yeah, attitudes, you know, this does determine, yeah, patterns of behaviour. You know, we can't escape from that.
Is there an oversensitivity in the way some of these stories are reported? I mean, are ethnic minorities looking for only positive spins when it comes to them?
I don't think there's an oversensitivity. I mean, I think that, you know, you rightly say, Madeleine McCann, I mean, it helps that she was good looking. I mean, you know, if she'd been ugly, you know, there are other factors involved in this as well, where human life is not regarded in the same value. But no, I mean, if you look at the principles around the world, I mean, even Jesse Jackson, the presidential candidate, once said that when he was walking in Washington and he turned around, he'd prefer to see white people behind him than black people. So, you know, after all, the history of slavery is not that long ago. It only ended in the United States, realistically, 50 years ago. Not in 1865, but 1965. So you've got assumptions in people's brains that I think go very, very deep about crime, and that is where the black population in Britain suffer. When these young kids die, they're branded together as some kind of gangland feuds, and it's addressed in that way, rather than a human story that the viewers of the newspapers can associate with.
Has anybody got it right, as far as you're concerned this year? Are you reading through? Have any newspapers, any journalists, any publications stood out for you and you thought, you know what, somebody's trying to buck the trend?
I think they've all been pretty much the same, and
that's a sad indictment, to be quite frank, from what we've heard tonight.
Absolutely, and that's why we applaud stations like these, trying to give a different perspective. But it's about people understanding that we have choices. We have the choice not to watch certain things. We have the choice not to read certain things, and we should exercise that choice fully and decide that certain things we wouldn't accept. We wouldn't accept reading about Muslims in a certain manner. We will never accept people talking about them in a certain manner, and it's just not acceptable.